So we are here at Cafe Adelaide in a quiet moment, which is hard to come by with you. But we have this background together because I'm a restaurant brat, and you come out of the top of the restaurant world with Joe Baum.
Yeah, I started right at the top, a dishwasher in Howard Johnston Times Square. I swear to God, that was my first job
In Times Square?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, but, you know, I know some of it, but not all of it. So tell me how the progression went, because what an era you were involved in restaurants and bars.
Yeah, I caught the end of a really extraordinary, music-wise too. I caught the end of 52nd Street. I'd moved up to 54th by then. Jimmy Ryan's, Eddie Condon's, the Half Note. They're all still there. My best friend's older brother was a jazz piano player. I knew some of those cats. We introduced ourselves to them when we got there. We were kids. They sort of embraced us, had no money. But we hung out in those days. They played half hour on, half hour off. We'd sit there and nurse a beer and listen to the music at the bar until somebody came along who needed the stool, who could pay money. But it was a great era. And I got Jerry's, my best friend's other brother was an advertising guy, and he knew Joe Baum, this legendary individual I kept hearing about.
Yep.
And through him, I met Joe.
Dear friend of my mother's.
Yeah, well, Joe, I mean, outside of the industry, I don't think people really know Joe's name, but within the industry, people do credit him with being one of the people that changed the way that we dine and drink in this country.
I mean, great concept after great concept. I mean, can you list a lot of them? I mean, Four Seasons.
Well, the Four Seasons in 1959 may have been the beginning of the new era of the culinary world in America, because in the 50s we were, we call it the age of the bland. I mean, we had canned foods. We had gone through 2 world wars, learned how to process and canned foods and send overseas to boys, and the commercial food processors just embraced this stuff.
Right.
We were so thrilled to have canned green beans. They tasted like, you know what, but we just loved the convenience. You know, we were giving our children canned breast milk. We lost our way, totally. So Joe, in the middle of that environment, opens up this extraordinary restaurant in one extraordinary building. And if you've seen the Seagram's building on Park Avenue, here's the street. The building is back here with huge reflecting pools out front. Now imagine the rent that these guys lost by not going out to the street and going up 59 floors. Right. And they did that for aesthetic reasons, because they had on that job 3 of the great architects of the 20th century: Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Philip Johnson, and Le Corbusier.
All of them.
And all of them in one way or another as consultants or as the main architect. And they wanted to, this is crazy, Edgar Bronfman Sr. wanted a Cadillac dealership on the ground floor, and everybody was aghast.
Right.
This beautiful architectural statement. And so Joe Baum, who was then the first president of Restaurant Associates, was given the task, it was his idea, of getting somehow into Seagram's office, Bronfman's office, and convincing him that he needed to do something extraordinary on that ground floor. And that extraordinary idea was the Four Seasons. This unbelievably seasonally changing, local produce kind of restaurant that hadn't been seen in this country since before First World War.
And so they changed the food, they changed the decor.
4 times a year.
And was that not the facility that they were writing about, maybe in Fountainhead? You know, you hear that.
Absolutely,
I don't know that.
totally.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's just thrilling.
I totally believe that. And when Alice Waters out on the West Coast, a young woman at that time, when Larry Forgione, just a kid starting out as a prep cook, when they saw this Four Seasons idea, they were inspired by it. And Joe went on to create, that same year, another great conceptual. He really created a theme restaurant. He opened the La Fonda del Sol in the Time Life building, another 1959 extraordinary creation. He had pisco sours and caipirinhas on his menu in 1959, and here we're just getting back to them now, you know. And mojitos, you know, mojito criollo.
So you got into the bar part of things at what point?
I fell into it by accident. Well, these advertising guys, we were just talking about that advertising show on TV now, these advertising guys were Olympic drinkers. I mean, and you know what? They could maintain.
Right.
They would drink and you'd never know it.
Right.
After 4 or 5 months.
Drunk.
No, they would maintain. They taught me the ethics of the bar room, what to order, when and why, how to treat the bartender, how to be at a bar, the ethics of the bar room.
Right.
And it was an extraordinary learning lesson for me in some great bars that were still around, and still some of them still around today.
Right.
And that was the beginning, I guess, of my love affair with the New York City Bar and Grill.
Right.
And that
but at some point, Joe gets to you and says, now, come on, we got to do as much with the bar as we're doing with the food.
Well, you know, after 6 months, I thought I knew everything. You know, like every bartender. You know, you be a doctor 8 years. Want to be a bartender 6 months? You got it all down, no problema. Of course, I get to the Hotel Bel Air in Los Angeles, a world-class hotel, and people are asking me for things I've never heard of, and all of a sudden I'm like, I guess I either better do this or get out. And I started to really study and understand the spirits behind me. Then I get back to New York, and Joe is opening a concept called Aurora. fine dining restaurant.
Yep.
He knows me from the old days. He knows that I know the stories. That's what Joe said. He wanted to hire me because I could tell the stories.
Yeah.
And Joe would bring somebody up to the bar and he'd say, "Hey Dale, this is a friend of mine. Take care of him, tell him the stories," and he'd walk away. Right? So Joe hires me at Aurora, and I see all the excitement building for the Rainbow Room down the block on the other side of town. I see Benny Goodman at the bar talking to Joe. He's going to be the opening orchestra. Sadly, he died before we opened. I see all this excitement and creativity. Milton Glaser, the great graphics, just incredible stuff. I wanted in.
Yeah.
So I said to Joe, how about a classic menu that from our perch up on Rockefeller Center, we look down on some great old clubs that used to exist, the Colony Restaurant on Fifth Avenue, the Copa, Dempsey's, the Stork Club. Why don't we take a drink from those menus, stick it on our menu, pay tribute to that, because he was paying tribute to that on the menu in the dining room.
So now you were studying now.
I'm studying.
Yeah.
Well, Joe had said to me when we opened, I want a real bar. I don't want mixes. I don't want any sour mix. I want a real bar. I didn't know what he was talking about. And it took me 18 months to figure it out. And thank God I had that time at a small fine dining restaurant to work my way through because we were all trained to make a drink like this by taking a gun with 2 ounces of sour mix and then adding a shot of whiskey, and that was your drink. It was done.
Yuck.
Now I got lemon juice, simple syrup, and I got to figure out how to do this drink fast for a lot of people and teach my bartenders. So that was the beginning of that whole back to the...
That was the beginning of the whole damn thing that's going on right now, in my opinion. I mean that. The
Thank you very
whole
much.
thing. But let me ask you.
And it was Joe. And it was Joe with Kevin Zraly, too, who put wine back on the table.
You did it.
All right, thank you,
He
darling.
pushed you a little bit, but you did it, and
Okay.
you started this whole thing, and we're all your,
Thank you very
disciples, apostles. But then, greatest bar on earth. Just tell me about that one. Greatest bar on
Well,
earth. I get this
first
thing
of
in the
all-
mail. I'm a restaurateur. I'm a little brat in New Orleans. We got restaurants. We think we know what to do. The greatest bar on earth. I'm like, well, what the heck is that?
So we've been through the first bombing, and the place never opened. In Hilco never decided to reopen it. Joe had created it in the beginning, this wonderful, wonderful windows on the world, and you couldn't get a reservation for 9 months, a year ahead of time. After the bombing, it laid fallow for a long time, and then they went back to Joe and they wanted him to recreate it. Well, first of all, I'm up at the Rainbow Room, and what I think is the greatest bar on earth, and all of a sudden I'm hearing their name, and this is the greatest bar on earth, and I was angry right off the bat. I'm saying, get out of here, I got the greatest bar on earth. Well, it was all the same company. I trained the bartenders there as well. We had an extraordinary beverage manager, a young woman who was just came out of Texas, and we used to be an investment banker, Andrea Immer. She takes over the beverage down there, and she and I put together a wonderful beverage program together down there, worked very closely. And sadly, the night before, on September 10th, 2001, I did a tequila tasting and tequila drink making hands-on with all the participants joining in like we did. It was called Spirits in the Skybox. I went to the bar afterwards. We opened a couple bottles of Veuve Clicquot. We decided to have dinner. Somebody knew the disc jockey. We stayed and danced. We closed the bar.
Not you.
Woke up the next morning, and the building was falling down.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's not the happy part of the story
No.
at all. But truly, everybody that I know in this industry, and when I was opening Swizzle Stick, and I'm like, I'm going to do a bar the way it should be done, and I'm going to have a block of ice, and we're going to, who'd I call but you? And that's when that was our first encounter, and I never could get it together to get you down here to do it, but we've been following you ever since. But anyway, Oogie Wawa, my friend.
Oogie Wawa.
Thanks for being here.
My name is Dale DeGroff, and I'm here in the land of cocktails.